Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing abrupt climate change. And the news just keeps on rolling in. As usual, thank you all for alerting me to some technical difficulties with the last video. I deleted the other video and re-uploaded this one. So hopefully it'll work better for you. Unfortunately, I had quite a few, I had really good comments on the other video. Excuse me. And I hated to delete it, but they wouldn't let me upload the other video without deleting that one. So it had to go. I also did not update the links that were in the last video into this new video. I will try to do that tonight. Hopefully everything is working. I haven't checked yet. So we are getting extreme already, extreme weather events, which we have been covering. I mean, pretty much all the time, extreme weather events, but already this summer, if we want to call it summer, late spring, what will we call this? Late May would be early summer. There was a crazy flash flood in Maryland. I saw all my friends, I have quite a few friends in Baltimore, the Baltimore area, and they were marking themselves safe. And I was like, what is going on? So this is what's going on, or what had gone on. Heavy rain and flash flooding devastate Ellicott City, Maryland. The state of emergency has been declared by Governor Larry Hogan. If that isn't an old school 1950s police drama name, I don't know what it is, Larry Hogan. After heavy rain and flash floods hit the historic Maryland city on Sunday. The floods are reminiscent of a July 2016 storm in the same area that killed 2 people and destroyed several local businesses. And there's some pictures and I believe some video, just some really crazy stuff going on. Video shows water rushing down Main Street in Ellicott City, just outside Baltimore. It's the same street devastated by flash flooding in July 2016. Howard County officials warned people to climb to the 2nd story of buildings. There's just a bunch of video and some tweets talking about this flash flooding. It's pretty crazy. I'm going to link this below. You guys can check this out. The aftermath, devastation, pretty crazy stuff. And yeah, we're seeing more and more of these events. They just continue to keep on going. Worldwide, extreme weather events seem to be the order of the day. And quite a few of you have been telling me about the Midwest heat wave, which is pretty nuts. Like, I believe in Texas, North Texas is, supposed to be in the 105, 106 range this week. That's high. I know Texas gets hot, but it doesn't, Texas in summer, is usually 95 with some humidity, and it feels terrible. 105 with the same humidity is absolutely, it's just a flat line. I mean, you're not going to be able to do much of anything. That's just craziness. Holiday heat wave. Chicago sees hottest day in 5 years. Monday, May 28th. Memorial Day long weekend has been putting the summer in the unofficial kickoff to summer in a big way across the plains and Midwest. As a heat wave sent temperatures soaring, Chicago recorded the hottest day in 5 years on Sunday. And I believe Sean was telling me about Minnesota has got some incredibly high temperatures. Minnesota is not supposed to be this hot. I'm sorry, not in late May. This is definitely unnatural heat. Chicago recorded the hottest day in 5 years on Sunday, with the thermometer climbing to a scorching 97 Fahrenheit, now the second hottest temperature in the record books for any day in May, while Minneapolis-St. Paul reached highs in the 90s for the fourth day in a row, tying the previous May record for such a stretch. More video. It's hot all over, St. Louis, Indianapolis, everywhere. Highs of 94 in Detroit, 95 in Indianapolis, 96 in St. Louis, 93 in Kansas City. Lincoln, Nebraska sees 97. Ooh-wee. I'm going to link this below so you all can check this out. Again, I'm going to say it, buckle up. We may not see the worst in 2018, but we're going to start to see some pretty crazy stuff. If it wasn't apparent to people last year that climate change was starting to rear its ugly head, it will become very, very apparent this year. And, you know, the next couple of years are going to hold some interesting things in store for us. So I wanted to move on to this article called The Silence of the Bugs. And this is from the New York Times, May 26th. 56 years after Rachel Carson's Silent Spring warned of bird die-offs from pesticides, a new biocrisis may be emerging. May. A study published last fall documented a 76% decline in the total seasonal biomass of flying insects netted at 63 locations in Germany over the last 3 decades. Losses in midsummer, when these insects are most numerous, exceeded 80%. This alarming discovery, made by mostly amateur naturalists who make up the volunteer-run entomological society Krefeld, raised an obvious question: was this happening elsewhere? Unfortunately, the question is hard to answer because of another problem: a global decline of field naturalists who study these phenomena. I'm going to say I was actually just barbecuing, and I had some meat patties that I wasn't eating because I'm vegetarian. I was cooking on the grill, and I left them out there, and I was like, there's not one fly, not one insect, not one insect is interested in this meat. This is bizarre. Most scientists today live in cities and have little direct experience with wild plants and animals, and most biology textbooks now focus more on molecules, cells, and internal anatomy than on the diversity and habits of species. It has become fashionable among some educators to belittle the teachings of natural history and scientific facts that can be regurgitated on tests in favor of theoretical concepts. The attitude may work for armchair physics or mathematics, but it isn't enough for understanding complex organisms and ecosystems in the real world. Computer models and equations are of little use without details from the field to test them against. Are we in the midst of a global insect Armageddon that most of us have failed to notice? Maybe we have noticed. Here's another data point. A decades-long decline in plant pollinating hawk moths has been reported in the Northeast, but its causes and consequences are uncertain because we know so little about the ecology of these insects. In days past, compiling such information would have made a respectable life's work for Linnaeus, Humboldt, or Darwin. Now such creatures are often ignored because studying them seems unlikely to generate publications, headlines, or grants that provide academics with tenure and prestige. This leaves us with little more than anecdotal evidence to work with. A recent story in the Telegraph noted that automobile windscreens in Britain, you know what I was trying to say, are no longer heavily caked with splattered insects. It reminded me of the tiny wings, legs, and antennas that used to smear the front of my car after midsummer drives during the 1970s. Nowadays, a drive through northern New York, where I live, yields barely a blemish. It is because cars are more streamlined. Not likely. Is it because cars are more streamlined? Not likely. Last July, I examined parked vehicles in Saranac Lake and found little or no bug debris, even on license plates or the blunt fronts of vans. What's behind the decline? Probably not climate change, according to the researchers in the German study who also monitored local weather during the survey. What about collisions with vehicles? Despite my experience in dashboard observations in Britain, one study published in 2015 estimated that hundreds of billions of insects are being killed in North America by cars and trucks every year. The study's authors called for additional research to determine whether what they found is contributing to the substantial declines of pollinating insects occurring on a global scale, thus putting the ecological functioning of natural areas and agricultural productivity in jeopardy. Cars were probably not the culprit in the German study, though, because it focused on nature reserves where road carnage is minimal. For some experts, the process of elimination leaves pesticides among the likely suspects. Why care about the new silence of the bugs? An across-the-board decline in flying insects, if true, means that an entire sector of the animal kingdom is in trouble, representing an immense diversity of life forms, from butterflies and beetles to hoverflies and damselflies. The eminent biologist Edward O. Wilson, who has spent much of his life studying ants, has warned if all mankind were to disappear, the world would regenerate back to a rich state of equilibrium that existed 10,000 years ago. If insects were to vanish, the environment would collapse into chaos. The widely reported decline of honeybees in the United States pales in comparison with the drop-off of bugs in Germany, if not in scale, then in the loss of biodiversity. Insects represent the vast majority of all animal species. Because they are pollinators and a vital part of the food chain, their absence would strike deep at the roots of life on Earth. I'm a lake scientist, and my colleagues and I have been struggling to explain our own mystery, a restructuring of plankton communities in the lakes worldwide in recent decades, which we've documented by examining sediment cores extracted from lake bottoms. This could signal problems for water quality, fisheries, or other aspects of lake ecology. Had we not taken the core samples, the geographic scale of this change might remain undetected because funding and rigorous field monitoring of plankton composition in lakes has often been lacking. Some experts have attributed the plankton shift to climate change, others to nitrogen pollution from agricultural runoff, but we need more long-term field studies to confirm the cause and anticipate its effects. The German insect data suggests another possibility. Could agricultural chemicals be poisoning aquatic organisms, including plankton and insects that begin their lives as aquatic larvae? We simply don't know. In Britain, the news report about car insect collisions was based on a study that relied on data from volunteers who monitored grid-like splatometers on their license plates. We need more of this sort of scientist-directed crowdsourcing. Citizen scientists in a few field research-oriented college communities like my own at Paul Smith College in the Adirondacks of New York are turning their yards, gardens, lakes, and forests into long-term monitoring stations. Online clearinghouses like iNaturalist, Budburst, and North American Breeding Bird Survey compile and archive field data for others to use and show that many species are changing their ranges and migration habits in response to climate change. In the United States, research scientists associated with a network of more than 24 long-term ecological monitoring centers have also been conducting more detailed field research for several decades. But these efforts are still not enough to keep track of the rapidly changing world. We need new crops of professionals trained in field biology and ecology to focus on important but less charismatic or commercially valued creatures than songbirds and honeybees. In 1996, an editorial in Conservation Biology warned that naturalists are dying off and asked, will the next generation of conservation biologists be nothing but a bunch of computer nerds with no firsthand knowledge of natural history? 2 decades later, we are beginning to realize how lucky we are that dedicated field expert and amateur naturalists remain to observe and record the distinctive flash of a firefly or the soft clatter of dragonfly wings, but we need more of them, and soon. If there is to be anything to be studied very soon. Of course, you all have been telling me about the lack of insects in your neck of the woods, wherever you might be. I am noticing it as well. I can't remember the last time I saw a snail. I can't remember the last time I saw a beetle. I see usually right around this time of year, or maybe it's a little later, we start seeing June bugs. I see not one June bug. I haven't seen a June bug in a couple of years. And they used to be, I remember seeing them every single summer. As soon as it started getting warm, right around this time, or maybe even more into mid-June, I would start to see, you'd see swarms of June bugs. They'd be like running into the screen door or whatever, I don't see any moths. I don't see any flies. I don't see any bees. Again, to follow up what this article is saying, like, clearly, people, it's saying that scientists are not actually looking at this data or looking at this, what's going on out in the wild, in the natural lands, and reporting back on it. And I would really, really like to see somebody discuss what the UV ratings are right now and their effects on insects. But I know you all have some thoughts on that as well. I'm going to move on to some sandbox news. if these dogs would please. So, I actually had a little bit of follow through from yesterday's rant, but I think I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to leave that alone because I had some thoughts on it, but they seem to have escaped me and I didn't write them down. So I really wish these dogs would be quiet. Please be quiet. It's probably not as loud to you as it is to me, but it's really loud. It's just like piercing my brain. All right. So, I've been kind of discussing here and there QAnon. Don't freak out. Oh my God, he's going to talk about it again. Just, relax. What I wanted to say is that, it's interesting. I've said this in other videos. It's just interesting that, in this day and age, if you even talk about certain things, you seem, people label you as kooky, or you're talking about conspiracy theories or whatever. The thing I would like to reiterate to people is, like, if you're a journalist covering a war, that doesn't mean you believe in the war. You're there covering the war. You're getting, like, information, right? If you're, a spy or somebody in the intel community, in another country getting information, that doesn't mean you're aligned with that country, or that would be a ridiculous idea. So when people are finding out information about anything, about school shootings, or there's been quite a bit, there's been a lot of weird stuff around the Las Vegas shooting that happened last year. A lot of people talking about that. But the thing is, if you're trying to find information, that doesn't necessarily mean that you believe the story, or that you believe in a conspiracy, or that you are aligned with, the alt-right, or that you're aligned with, or that you think that that you're an anti-Semite because you think, the Rothschilds are, none of that is true. So just, it really bums me out that people can't even talk about things or investigate things without it becoming, like, oh my God, how dare you talk about this thing that's supposedly not true, like, hey, there are people trying to find out whether it's true or not, or, what holds validity and what does not, that is called science, actually. So I'm going to read something from Caitlin Johnson, and she actually thinks that QAnon is a Pied Piper operation. I'm going to read this. I may give a little, because this is from another viewpoint. So this is another viewpoint on the phenomenon, which I find interesting. WikiLeaks calls QAnon a likely Pied Piper operation. A few months back, I started having bizarre interactions on social media of a kind I've never experienced previously. Suddenly, whenever I'd write about President Trump's nonstop warmongering and capitulations to longstanding neoconservative agendas like implementing aggressive new Cold War escalations against Russia along multiple fronts, the illegal occupation of Syria with the stated goal of effecting regime change, increasing troop presence in Afghanistan, unprecedented civilian deaths in drone strikes, facilitating the slaughter of civilians in Yemen, or the administration's open regime change policy against Iran. I'd get all these weird accounts telling me things like, trust the plan, and this is the art of the deal. Trump is playing 4D chess, which I think is totally hilarious, and saying I should research something called QAnon or Q. It happens literally every time I write anything critical of this administration, a deluge of commenters telling me, in effect, shush, calm down, this is nothing. What looks like Trump facilitating long-time establishment agendas, just like his predecessors, is actually brilliant strategic maneuvering, every single time without a single solitary exception. It got particularly frustrating when I tried to talk about Attorney General Jeff Sessions' statement that arresting WikiLeaks editor-in-chief Julian Assange is a high priority for this administration, a statement Trump personally supported. These Q people told me they had great news for me. Assange is no longer languishing in London's Ecuadorian embassy. No, some clever researchers had deciphered some cryptic statements from an anonymous poster on 8chan, and it turns out that Assange is now walking free and enjoying a full presidential pardon. Some even say it's Assange's own mother. Okay, so that's actually, I'm gonna just talk about this after I read it. Unless you move in certain circles, you may never have even heard of the Q phenomenon. It's almost never in the news and very, very seldom comes up in anything resembling mainstream discourse. God, please be quiet, guys. But for people like me who write about the behavior of America's unelected power establishment, it comes up a lot and can be a bit of an obstacle of the lucid sharing of ideas and information. To summarize, someone claiming to be an insider with Q clearance began making posts on the anonymous message board 4chan. That is true. A notorious online playground for millions of meme creators, trolls, and nerds, which has fostered a massively enthusiastic pro-Trump zeitgeist since 2015. 4chan users refer to one another as anons, so Q is often referred to as QAnon. Q would share intentionally vague clues they refer to as crumbs and encourage readers to research what was meant by them, usually leading towards incriminating information about Trump's political rivals and never toward any incriminating information about Trump. That's true too. The post moved from 4chan to the related forum 8chan, with disputed claims of authenticity. This has created a dynamic wherein an anonymous poster shares extremely vague messages, and many thousands of Q enthusiasts go off combing the internet to find out what is meant by them. There are disputes within the community about precisely what is meant by each post, but the net result is universally the same. All the information confirms that Trump is a brilliant hero who is fighting the deep state, and all of Trump's political enemies are corrupt criminals, pedophiles, and Satanists. All that is asked of Q's army of woke patriots is that they have faith and trust the plan, and to know in their hearts that soon the President of the United States will solve all the nation's problems. Now, who could possibly benefit from such an arrangement? I've been openly critical of QAnon for many months, but it's hard to write anything substantial about this subject because the QAnon phenomenon is so amorphous and is spread all over the internet. It is a sprawling, non-cohesive conversation consisting of many thousands of parts. So anything you say about it will immediately be slammed as untrue by its more passionate enthusiasts because you're not saying it in exactly the way that they should say it. That plus the faith-based, religion-like reality tunnel Q enthusiasm, religion-like reality tunnel Q enthusiasm requires one to espouse makes engaging this topic about as much fun as debating creationists online. So I've been avoiding writing about it. For that reason, I was very happy to see the journalist Susie Dawson had posted an epic in-depth thread about why she views QAnon as a Pied Piper operation. The thread is worth reading in its entirety. Easier done here in this thread reader due to its size. Dawson explains how QAnon uses standard PSYOP tactics, first establishing credibility and then implementing gamification and spirituality to suck followers into an energized, cultish mentality which leaves them susceptible to suggestion, manipulation, and direction. From there, they are told things like not to worry about Julian Assange at a time when he needs our support and activism more than ever before, or told to be suspicious of Edward Snowden. She shows using primary source documents that Snowden has revealed vastly more to the public about the mechanics of the deep state than QAnon ever has, including information about the CIA, and shows who does and does not benefit from this operation. Yesterday, Dawson's thread was shared by the WikiLeaks Twitter account with comment. This analysis, unfortunately, increasingly appears that it may be correct. In response to a tweet from Roseanne Barr asking where is Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks account, which has long been a multi-user account run by the rotating WikiLeaks staff, replied that he is gagged and isolated as a result of the Trump administration's betrayal of the Constitution and the demands of those who voted for it. Barr, who has promoted QAnon in the past, replied that WikiLeaks' answer was BS, to which they responded with Dawson's thread. This would line up with a comment made by Assange a month prior to his being silenced and isolated by the Ecuadorian embassy in March, in which he responded to someone who had heard an internet rumor that he was secretly free, saying it was probably a black PR campaign amplified by CIA contractors to reduce the support for WikiLeaks. So on one hand, we've got WikiLeaks insiders saying QAnon is likely a psyop designed to Pied Piper the populist right and to supporting establishment agendas. And the other, we've got an anonymous someone on 8chan saying, trust the plan, and the president is awesome. These are not equally credible sources. It would make perfect sense for the U.S. intelligence community to conduct psychological operations against those on the right who espouse anti-establishment ideals, since they've been conducting them on the anti-establishment left for generations. Any political faction in the U.S. which opposes war, corruption, and oligarchy is going to be infiltrated, monitored, and manipulated. And there's no reason to believe the faction which elected Trump on the basis of his anti-globalist and anti-interventionist positions wouldn't get the same treatment. The same intelligence agencies which have successfully manipulated a large portion of America's left wing into despising Assange are now manipulating the right wing into despising Snowden. The same social engineers who manipulated Obama's base into ignoring his warmongering and oligarchic capitulations are now doing exactly the same for Trump's base. Somebody's benefiting from this, and it ain't you. This administration is advancing long-standing neoconservative agendas with increasing aggression, perpetuating the Orwellian surveillance surveillance state of Bush and Obama, and actively pursuing the extradition and imprisonment of Julian Assange. Ignore the narratives and watch the behavior, and he looks very much like his predecessor. So cut out the narratives, cut out the manipulators, cut out QAnon from the equation, and look at what's really happening here. That is Caitlin Johnson weighing in on QAnon. I'm going to link this article. Y'all can tell me your thoughts. I don't think there's many people who are into the QAnon thing and understand what's going on or what it is saying. And Caitlin Johnson actually doesn't understand what it's saying on a lot of levels, and that's why she doesn't understand what's happening. But I will say that I totally agree that the whole patriot thing is very scary. It is actually trying to rev up people to believe in this whole cause or this whole operation or whatever you want to call it. That is a very patriotic endeavor. I find that frightening, definitely, personally, on a lot of levels. I've actually said many times to people about Trump that I thought that he, this whole time that, Bush kind of with 9/11, Bush kind of slammed in some things that undermined our rights, our basic legal rights and human rights, the Patriot Act, et cetera, et cetera. The ND, is it the NDNS or the NDDS? I don't know, whatever it's called, the National Defense Act. I think I'm totally mangling it. But anyways, those things greatly empowered the government, greatly empowered the president, and greatly empowered the intelligence communities to spy on us and do whatever it is that they need to do to keep us in line. And Obama actually carried that forward. He did not put any brakes on that at all. And so, my thought about Trump becoming president is that he, the whole time that Obama was president and people were talking about, how he was going to put everybody in FEMA camps and, take away everybody's guns and declare martial law and all that, all this stuff. Trump is actually the perfect person to do that, to do all of that, right? He is, he's the likely person to do all of that, but who knows? To tie that in with the QAnon thing, there have been some posts suggesting that the military is prepared to declare martial law in the event of civil unrest, like on a major scale. And they've actually hinted that it might be necessary in the next year or two. So that's a frightening thing to think about, if that is true. This is why it's a good reason to pay attention to this stuff, because if you didn't know this was happening, you didn't know what was being said, right? Because apparently this person is part of military intelligence, or apparently this person has inside knowledge of what's going on. Maybe they do, and maybe they don't. But if they do, and they're totally telegraphing, or, they're totally megaphoning, hey guys, we're going to declare martial law on you, whenever we feel like it, that might be a good thing to know. Anyways, that's all I have to say on that. But I will say, though, that she is, Caitlin actually has missed some points that were very important. QAnon is not trying to turn everybody against Edward Snowden. They're actually saying that Snowden is a part of the operation. So actually, she's got it totally wrong and completely backwards. As far as Julian Assange goes, I don't know. Nobody's heard from him. I think WikiLeaks has been taken over, because I've seen some tweets from WikiLeaks that were totally what? Completely out of character, completely out of pocket, just almost kind of, going along with, dare I say, some, mainstream liberal ideas. And I was, I've just seen a few tweets from WikiLeaks that made me raise my eyebrows in a very large way. I think WikiLeaks has been compromised. I think somebody has infiltrated WikiLeaks, and they're trying to pose as we're still WikiLeaks, but we're actually, and whatever, to feed into the whole thing. If WikiLeaks is now saying that, don't listen to QAnon, does that mean they actually believe that QAnon is a psyop, or does that actually mean that they've been taken over by the deep state? Anyways, one last thing, and I am going to end this video. One last thing on a sandbox note. You have all the, if everybody has seen on social media the picture of children, immigrant children in cages, and everybody's saying, oh my God, Trump is an animal. Trump has been doing this stuff to people. Oh, and what it ended up happening is that picture is from 2014. So they ran this huge story about, how Trump's immigration policies are, they're, maniacal and he's a monster, blah, blah, blah. And this picture is from the Obama administration era. And so all of these people had to, delete the pictures and go, oops, I'm sorry, we didn't know, we messed up. The problem with doing stuff like that, the problem with liberals or the left, running these stories, willing to, just jump out on these stories about Trump and they end up not being true. It just makes him look better. It's just not helpful. And this is one of my main problems with mainstream media is that, we've had numerous times when the Washington Post and the New York Times have run factually inaccurate articles and have been totally part of this whole, thing to run Trump out of office, and it just makes him look stronger. And it actually gives a lot of ammunition to all the QAnon folks who are behind Trump. And they just get more emboldened and more empowered. So, dear dear left-ish or liberal media, please get your facts straight. All right, that's all I have for today. Thank you for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. I hope to be back tomorrow with another video. Until next time, peace.